it's Nikki here. I'm here today to talk about Ender's Game by Scott Orson card. This is the spoiler-free portion of the review for this, so I will try not to give anything away, although this book has been out for a while, so chances are anybody who's been a fan of sci-fi has probably read it or at least heard of it. And honestly, this is one of my personal favorites in this genre, and I'm a huge sci-fi fan to begin with, and within the last 2 years I probably reread this book about 6 or 7 times. It's just something I find really easy to go back to. So the summary of the book is you are following a 6-year-old boy, or he's 6 at the start of the book, and as he's being taken to command school to become the savior for the human race. This is not a spoiler, as it specifically says it on the back of the book, and they talk about it on the first page of the very first chapter, so they state it outright pretty quickly. So what this is really about is just kind of his development into this perfect military commander that they're wanting, and it follows him during his school years and all the associated activities with it, and it follows him through all of this with all the different people he meets and scenarios he's in. It has really good pacing, and the entire book is done from the main character's perspective, Ender Wiggin. And within that, they also have kind of little intros with each chapters that it's kind of military commands commentary. It gives context to what's going on in the chapter and context to what's going on outside of Ender's thoughts and what he knows about the situations going on. And like I said, it's really just this child they're training to save the world, and that's really what the book is about. So I'm setting up my likes and dislikes. I did 3 likes, 3 dislikes for this book. The first like is something I've already mentioned, Ender's perspective. I really enjoy how he just has this childlike innocence, but still very intelligent. It comes across very nicely when you're in his head with him. There's all this childlike wonder with a lot of creativity and thinking up new scenarios and thinking around corners, for lack of a better term. But it's also intelligent because he uses it strategically and uses it to push himself forward to be the best, which is kind of what he figures out he needs to be. The other thing I really enjoy is the setting. It's in the future, and we're living in this world that is still reacting to 2 previous attacks from the buggers, or this other alien race that they're dealing with. And these attacks both came previous to Ender's lifetime. And the thing I really liked about this is kind of this looming sense of dread of this third war, this worst war, this hopefully war to end all wars. And it really actually makes me think a lot of what I get out of when I read about the looming First and Second World Wars. It's kind of this this fear of the war and shame of the previous wars, and just how humanity showed itself in the previous wars. And I just really liked that flavor, that even though it was so far in the future, it had ties to something that was much more tangible, such as our First and Second World War here. The third thing I really enjoyed was the inclusion of the military commentary at the beginning of each chapter. Like I mentioned, it does give really good context to the different actions and settings for each chapter. It gives you a little bit more perspective outside of Ender's perspective, which I really like because it helps push the story forward at a much more effective pace. It also gives you insight into the people in charge. So the military people who are in charge of the school that Ender gets sent to, and in charge of the war that is looming ahead of them. And those are my 3 likes. Moving on to my 3 dislikes. I'll start with the first. It was the treatment of children in the book. Without going into too much detail, many situations in the book are abuse of children in some form. Some more severe than others, but it does exist. And the fact that some of the adults that are meting out these actions have as much power as they do just really rubs me the wrong way. The second negative, or the second dislike for me with this one, is the general lack of privacy, just of the children. I know that can be common in the military, But specifically what I'm talking about is the monitors in the neck. This is the monitor that Ender starts the book off with. And the entire family really has to sign their privacy away because it will pick up everything that Ender picks up. And they have so many people monitoring the input and output from this child's brain that they are able to track kind of everything going on in the household. And it just, the idea that everything would be exposed like that is very unnerving. And so just kind of that kind of invasion of privacy rubs me the wrong way, although it's very minor in the overall tone of the book. And the third dislike I have for this book is that not all the side characters are fleshed out equally. This isn't a major thing because there are so many characters, they couldn't flesh all of them out equally within a single book. That being said, there's a number of characters who, once we were introduced to them, I would have liked to had a broader side story with them in it, just to get to know them a little bit better, because they were so interesting just upon meeting them that I couldn't imagine that any story or background of them could not have also been interesting. And that's really all of my likes and dislikes here. I will move on next to the characters. All right, and so like I had mentioned, there is a large cast of characters, and so you have lots of side characters. And that's because Ender Wiggin, who's your protagonist, is also the perspective you're watching from and reading from. So almost all characters are kind of side characters. So I'll just talk about Ender a little bit. He's intelligent, he's pragmatic, he's strategic. And one thing I like about him is he's flawed. Not desperately, tragically flawed, but he is flawed nonetheless. But because of how the book is written and the context that's given to the reader based on what Ender is going through, he's very sympathetically written. So even though he's flawed, you sympathize with a lot of what he's going through, and you tend to not hold these flaws against him. I also really liked that the story was from his perspective. Like I had mentioned, it's a child's perspective, which adds a really kind of fun lens to the story that keeps it engaging, especially when you contrast it to some of the military commentary that's at the beginning of some of the chapters. And it just overall is very effective at moving the story forward, using these two different tones to contrast and move the story. The two other characters I'm going to talk about briefly here are Valentine and Peter. They are Ender's older siblings. They're the reason he exists in the world they are in. Shouldn't be a spoiler. They talk about it in the first few chapters. Ender is a third in a time where people are only allowed 2 children typically, but because of this military program they have, sometimes families can be allowed to have a third child, and that such was the case with Ender's parents. The program, Peter and Valentine both went through the program, and so he's kind of the reason for them existing. So they're very prominent at the beginning of the book because it explains why he's here and why he's the choice to be the savior of the human race. They explain why he's the choice to be the savior of the human race, and they're very prominent at the beginning of the story. There are a variety of peers as he goes through the school and the other various activities related to this. While they're not all fleshed out equally, they all fill a very good role. They're either moving the story forward or they're developing Ender's character, both of which help just fill in this really nice, detailed world from this child's perspective. Even though they're not all fleshed out equally, they'll have an important role in terms of the overall story and character. And that's really all I'm going to say about in the spoiler-free portion of this review. To wrap it up, I will kind of just mention it again. Ender's Game by Scott Orson Card. It is a brilliant book, especially if you enjoy sci-fi. I really recommend it if you haven't read it yet. And like I said, it's a personal favorite of mine. I would give it a 5 out of 5 stars. It is a good story with a solid cast of characters and just a very interesting perspective being done from the perspective of this highly intelligent, childlike perspective from Ender Wiggin's point of view. And that's really all I have to say about it. You should read it, guys. And I will see you in the next video, which will be the spoiler-filled review for this book. Bye! Hey guys, it's Nikki. I'm here to announce my Book of the Month book club book for March. This month I'm reading The Ballroom by Anna Hope. It's a historical fiction romance that takes place in a early 1900s British mental institution. So I'm excited to read it. I think some of the characters are going to be pretty flawed, which will be very interesting. And I'm curious to see how it'll wrap up. I'm hopeful. I want to enjoy it. And I will see you guys at the end of the month when we do the Book of the Month review. Bye.